Hi, everybody. Welcome. We'll get started here in a few minutes. We'll get started here in a few minutes as soon as we let a few people show up. If nobody comes up with anything else to go through, then we'll go through that Roman cult slave scam presentation. Okay, well, this one's called the Roman cult slave scam. It goes through step by step about how we've been enslaved by the Roman cult. And first of all, I'm not a liar. Well, I'm a lawyer. No, I'm not a liar. You should never take my word for anything. You should always do your own research. I provided references to aid you in your research, but I don't know everything, and I'm open to any ideas. There's 4 types of people you'll meet in your life. There's the people who try to wake up the slaves. There's the slave masters. There's the people who have no idea they're slaves. And there's the people who like being slaves. Which one are you? Do you really know for sure? Are you who you think you are? If you can see through the illusion, then you are the solution. If the people don't know their basic rights and freedoms, then how on earth can they possibly know when or if their rights and freedoms are being infringed? Never forget the men who started this country were marijuana-growing, whiskey-drinking, tax-evading rebels who left their beds at night to shoot at the pigs. All tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect of the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. That's the beginning of the Declaration of Independence. And that is Jefferson's seal. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Notice it shows that the Egyptian armies in the Red Sea, it shows the children of Israel on the shore, and it shows the pillar of fire. The issue today is the same as it has been throughout all history, whether man shall be allowed to govern himself or be ruled by a small elite. And that's Jefferson. Okay, so he was talking about his time. Well, gee, it looks like it's the same today, too. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying a foundation for such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. More on the Declaration of Independence. A free people claim their rights as derived from the laws of nature and not as the gift of their chief magistrate. That's right. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. But when a long train of abuses, usurpations, and pursuing invariably the same objective evinces a design to reduce them under utter absolute despotism, that's dictatorship, folks. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. That doesn't mean just, oh, go away and leave me alone. That means you slap them. And to provide new guards for their security, such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And then, after that, it's a list of grievances. The Declaration of Independence again. We are being forced to learn what the Founding Fathers learned. This video will show you that we are being enslaved, and it has been planned and orchestrated. At the Council of Nicaea, step 1, seize Christianity. At the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine presented his view of Christian theology and asked for comments. There were many Christians who were present who objected to his view of Christian theology, and after they revealed themselves, Roman soldiers appeared and murdered them. Then Constantine presented again his view of Christian theology, and miraculously, everybody agreed. The Christian theology consists of what we know today as the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Constantine-approved New Testament consisted of 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, none of which were written by people who knew Christ, Yeshua, or were even alive at the time. He was alive, and they were all written at least 70 years after the crucifixion, and were hearsay. Paul was someone who was an accomplice to the murder of many Christians after the crucifixion, and he claims to have had a vision and repented. Approximately 90% of the New Testament considers the letters of Paul to various cities. There are no witnesses to this vision. Some people call Paul the great deceiver. The New Testament books that were banned were Gospels like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Some say may have been his wife, some say may have been his wife, and the Gospel of Thomas, who was one of the apostles. The Old Testament books that were banned include the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jasher, the Book of Jubilees, and many others, some of which are mentioned in the Old Testament. The Roman cult also murdered anyone who was found in possession of any of these books, and in fact it was illegal in Europe to be in possession of the Bible up until the 18th century. The Cathars were a Christian sect in northern Italy and southern France that the Roman cult exterminated in the 14th century. So step 2, seize the bar in London. We will establish perpetual obligation and concession. We will establish that from the proper and special revenues or our aforesaid kingdoms for all the service and customs which we ought to render for them, saying in all things the penny of St. Peter, the Roman Church shall receive yearly 1,000 marks sterling, namely at the feast of St. Michael 500 marks, and at Easter 500 marks. 700, namely for the Kingdom of England, and 300 for the Kingdom of Ireland. That's taken from the Concessions of England to the Pope, 1213. And not long after this, by a general excommunication of the king and people for several years because they would not suffer an archbishop to be imposed upon them, John was reduced to such straits that he surrenders his kingdoms to Pope Innocent III to receive them again and hold them of him under the rent of 1,000 marks. And that's Tomlin's Law Dictionary, Volume 2, under the definition of Pope. So this is where he said he surrendered the kingdoms to the pimp, the Pope, the pimp, to receive them again and hold them under the rent of 1,000 marks. Seize London and the bar. The city of London has a wall around it. William the Conqueror failed to conquer the city of London. It contains the Parliament buildings, contained the Inn of Court, and its foreign territory to the rest of England. Kind of like the District of Columbia is foreign territory to the rest of the United States of America. After the concessions of England to the Pope in 1213 was signed, King John had to make money to pay his tribute. King John imposed martial law rule and started to do things to raise money to pay his tribute. It took only 2 years for the people to figure out what was happening, and the Magna Carta was the result in 1215. This is a Quebec court case. Perlman versus Pichet, an Attorney General of Canada, intervenant reference habeas corpus at 4 Dominion Law Reports 147. Quote, the Magna Carta is not a unilateral act emanating solely from the spontaneous will of the king, as the charters of the predecessors of John. Neither is it a treaty, for we cannot say it was concluded between two legitimate and independent sovereignties, nor between two nations, nor is it a law. The barons do not appear in it as subjects, for they are freed from their promise of fidelity, and the king, brought captive, placed before them, submitted to the conditions which the conquerors imposed upon him. Magna Carta is therefore a contract, but resembles a treaty concluded between two nations, in that one of the parties, in virtue of the law of war, can impose its will upon the other. And so, what they did, folks, is they stuck a sword to his throat and they said, here, king, we want you to sign this, or we'll run you through right now. Inns of Court. These are certain private unincorporated associations in the nature of collegiate houses located in London, invested with the exclusive privilege of calling men to the bar. There's Gray's Inn, there's Inner Temple, there's Middle Temple, and there's Lincoln's Inn. There's an American Inns of Court Foundation. Every state has local Inns of Court chapters. There's a website for the Inns of Court. American Inns of Court in Alexandria, Virginia. How appropriate, it's just outside of the District of Columbia. You know, one thing I was thinking about doing that I should probably do is right here. I'm going to insert something. Just so everybody knows about the City of London. There we go. There's the City of London. This is in my book. I actually took this file from my book files. Most people don't have the courage to share this. This is the City of London, this small little country that almost no one has heard about, funded all sides of World War I, World War II, and will start World War III if we do not stop them. An attorney. He is, however, in a sense, an officer of the state with an obligation to the court. His first duty is to the courts and to the public, not to the client. And whenever his duties to the client conflict with those as an officer of the court in the administration of justice, the former must yield to the latter. Clients are also called wards of the court. This is taken from Book 7, Corpus Juris Secundum, Section 4, Attorneys. Now, so he's not working for you. You hire an attorney, you think he's working for you. Hello, you're a ward of the court. You're an imbecile. A ward of the court is an infant, a person of unsound mind. Their rights must be jealously guarded. Yeah, right. A ward of the court is an imbecile. If you hire an attorney, you're an imbecile. Impropria persona, in one's own proper person. It is a rule in pleading that pleas to the jurisdiction of the court must be pled impropria persona, because if pleaded by attorney, they admit the jurisdiction as an attorney is an officer of the court, and he is presumed to plead after having obtained leave, which admits the jurisdiction. And the City of London, this is Magna Carta now. Evidence of the martial law that King John went and imposed upon the people of England that precipitated the Magna Carta. So we have these Roman cult bar members all through the country now. Anyways, And the city of London shall have all its ancient liberties and free customs as well by land and by water. Furthermore, we decree and grant that all our cities, boroughs, towns, and ports shall have all our liberties and free customs. So they were charging money to go into the city, or they were wanting to search you. We got to search you and make sure you don't have any weapons. No village or individual shall be compelled to make bridges at riverbanks except those from of old who were legally bound to do so. No sheriff, constable, coroners, or others of our bailiffs shall hold pleas of the crown. What the fuck do you think those fucking pigs are doing on the side of the road? No constable or other bailiff of ours shall take corn or other provisions from anyone without immediately tending money therefor, unless he shall have postponement thereof by the permission of the seller. So they were stealing people's corn. No sheriff or bailiff or other person shall take the horses or carts of any freeman for transport duty against the will of said freeman. So they were stealing people's horses and carts. That's all they had in those days. Neither we nor our bailiff shall take for our castles or for any other work of ours wood which is not ours against the will of the owner. They were stealing people's wood. No bailiff for the future shall upon his own unsupported complaint put anyone to his law without credible witnesses brought for their purposes. What do you think the pigs do on the side of the road? To no one will we sell, to no one will we refuse delay, right, or justice. What do you think every court in the country does? Check out my other videos. Bankster Thieves playlist. It's a good thing this kind of stuff comes around because I was starting to get worked up there. Check out my other videos. Roman Cult or Bankster Thieves playlist, Roman Cult playlist, bankrupt corporate so-called governments, bar members 1 through 4, do-it-yourself, how not to volunteer for the selective service in the draft, martial laws here, do-it-yourself no income tax, do-it-yourself free mail, do-it-yourself kangaroo courts, Canada Border Pigs playlist, bar members and their Satanic Connections playlist. Step 3, slavery and murder. Enslave anyone who does not go along with your satanic agenda. Murder anyone who does not go along with your satanic agenda. Steps up the scenario for the U.S. Civil War, plunders Aztec and other civilizations. Papal bull dum diversus. Inter serrera. We'll talk about the dum diversus and the inter serrera here. Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull dum diversus on 18th of June, 1452. It authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to reduce any Saracens and pagans. Saracens were Muslims and pagans and other unbelievers, anybody that wasn't Catholic, to perpetual slavery. This facilitated the Portuguese slave trade from West Africa. The same pope wrote the bull Romanus Pontifex on January 5th, 1455, to the same Alfonso as follow-up to the dum diversus. It extends to the Catholic nations of Europe, dominion over discovered lands during the Age of Discovery, along with sanctifying the seizure of non-Christian lands. It encouraged the enslavement of native non-Christian peoples in Africa and the New World. Why do you think they went in there and just wholesale murdered them? We weighing all the singular, the premise with due meditation, and noting that since we had formerly by our letters and ours granted, among other things, free and ample faculty to the said King Alfonso to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ, wheresoever placed in the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable, immovable goods whatsoever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors, the kingdoms, dukedoms, countries, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his and their use and profit, by having secured the said faculty, the said King Alfonso, and by his authority the aforesaid infant justly and lawfully has acquired and possessed and doth possess these islands, lands, harbors, and seas, and if they do of right belong and pertain to the said King Alfonso and his successors. And in 1493, Alexander VI issued the bull Inter Serrera, stating one Christian nation did not have the right to establish dominion over lands previously dominated by another Christian nation, thus establishing the law of nations. So before that, there was no law of nations. Inter Serrera is the law of nations. The start of it. Together, the Dum Diversus, the Romanus Pontifex, and the Inter Serrera came to serve as a basis and justification for the doctrine of discovery, the global slave trade of the 15th and 16th centuries, and the age of imperialism. From 1203 to 1805, 50 million Christians died suffering at the hands of Rome because they believed in Christ alone. They died through Europe, especially Spain, for they saw all but Christ as vain, he who suffered by his death for men to save them from their awful sin. 600 years of martyred saints that history cannot erase. With iron heel and iron hand, the Roman popes rule the land. This is a book called The Lines of Demarcation of Pope Alexander VI and the Treaty of Tordesillas. It's taken from the translations of the Royal Society of Canada. And here it is, right here. It says, if therefore we put aside the movement, the conventional law or treaty law of nations, it will be seen that modern international law is founded on the Roman law and on the canon law, which latter was carried over Europe by the Roman Church. For even in England, up to the time of Edward III, the Lord Chancellor was always an ecclesiastic. Okay, that means Roman cult. Step 4, redefine the nature of the contract with private international law. Alberto Alberico Gentili was an Italian lawyer, jurist, and a former standing advocate to the Spanish embassy in London, who served as Regius Professor of Civil Law at the University of Oxford for 21 years, recognized as founder of the science of international law. Gentili is perhaps one of the most influential people in legal education ever to have lived. He is one of 4 men referred to as the father of international law. Gentili has been the earliest writer on public international law and the first person to split secularism from canon law and Roman Catholic theology. So anyways, that's where, again, we're talking about international law, how it all got started. The War of Independence, step 5, War of Independence. The Roman cults bought and paid for Satanists. King George III becomes a tyrant and enslaves the colonists under martial law. The colonists rebel, precipitating the War of Independence. This is the definitive Treaty of Peace of 1783. And if you notice here, in the highlighted part, says it having pleased the divine providence to dispose the hearts of the most serene and potent Prince George III, by the grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland. So he was King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland. Well, we're going to go through here in a minute where there was a treaty that the U.S. signed. They agreed to pay back 18 million livres to France. So King George was financed both sides of the War of Independence. But also, let's continue. Says Duke of Brunswick and Lunenburg, Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and of the United States of America. So he's Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the United States of America. Get a load of that. Anyways, let's keep moving. Causes and necessities for taking up arms. Statutes have been passed extending the course of admiralty and vice-admiralty far beyond their ancient limits, for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial, and for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter. We saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. So that's the first thing they do when they impose martial laws. It supersedes and replaces common law. It's military dictatorship, folks. That's exactly what happened then, and it's happening now. When King George assaulted the colonists with the Roman cult, Satanic Roman law, he breached the trust. When Franklin J. Adams Hartley signed the so-called treaty, they perjured their oaths because they made the criminal act of George III legal under their satanic international law. The Definitive Treaty of Peace, 1783, is a fraud and a nullity. The Definitive Treaty of Peace converted criminal activities by King George into a contract. They should have made war on them. They should have made war until the British conceded. With the Roman cult, there is no peace. It's constant commercial warfare. King George III is a traitor, was King of England and France, financed both sides of the War of Independence. Step 6, create the bankruptcy scenario. King George III and his predecessors and their Roman cult handlers deliberately made things so tyrannical that people were leaving in droves. Why do you think people were wanting to come to America? It was because they were tired of the tyranny in Europe. Queen Elizabeth the bitch is George's successor. Prince Philip, that son of a bitch, good riddance to that son of a bitch. The first U.S. bankruptcy. This is the Carolina Charter, 1663. Yielding and paying yearly to us, our heirs and successors, for the same, the yearly rent of 20 marks of lawful money of England, at the feast of all saints, yearly forever, the first payment thereof to begin and to be made on the feast of all saints, which shall be the year of our Lord, 1665, and also 1/4 part of all gold and silver ore, within the limits aforesaid, shall from time to time happen to be found. So they were supposed to pay 20 marks and 1/4 of all the gold and silver ore. Carolina Charter, 1663. Well, get a load of where the Carolina Charter was. Right there. Coast to coast. And further, this is also a Declaration of Rights, 1776, North Carolina Constitution. And nothing further, and provided further that nothing herein contained shall affect the titles and possessions of individuals holding or claiming under the laws heretofore in force, or grants heretofore made by late King George II or his predecessors, or the late Lord Proprietors, or any of them. So they wanted to continue on these debts. This is the treaty that I was talking about. Treaty between the King and the 13 colonies, United States of North America, signed at Versailles, July 16, 1782. Article 1. It's agreed and certified that the sums advanced by His Majesty to the Congress of the United States under the title of a loan in the years 1778, 1779, 1780, 1781, and the present 1782 amount to the sum of 18 million livres, money of France, according to the following 21 receipts of the above-mentioned underwritten Minister of Congress, given in virtue of his full powers, to wit, and we'll go on. We'll talk about it more here, I think. I'm not sure. Maybe we don't. Anyways, the source is Treaties and Other International Acts of the United States of America, edited by Hunter Miller, Volume 2, Documents 1 to 40, 1776 to 1818, Washington, Government Printing Office, 1931. Now, let's go back to this Definitive Treaty of Peace here real quick. I just want to look at something. So, isn't that interesting? United States of America did exist because King George was our treasurer and prince elector of United States of America, not the United States of America, just United States of America, separate entity. That's interesting. Of course, it'd be interesting to look at the original document because we've been talking about that, about whether it's the United States of America or just United States of America. Because in the Articles of Confederation, it says it's the United States of America. You can't tell me that Franklin, Jay, and Adams, or Hartley, or any of the founders of the day did not know that King George III was King of England and France. Of course they knew. The founders were all Masons. Because of this, King George became arch-treasurer and prince-elector of the United States of America. They should have said, screw you. Therefore, some of the founders were in on it. In Tarrant versus Taylor, it was stated that the dissolution of the regal government no more destroyed the rights of the church to possess and enjoy property which belonged to it than it did the right of any other corporation or individual to his or its own property. In the later case, the Chief Justice, in reference to the corporation of the college, observes that it was too clear to require the support of argument that all contracts and rights respecting property remain unchanged by the Revolution, and the same sentiment was enforced more at length by the other judge who noticed this point in the cause. So the point being is that the debts pass on, continue on. There are two ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by sword and the other is by debt. The leaders in the War of Independence knew the threats that bar members were to anyone wanting freedom, and they repeatedly tried to make sure that bar members were prohibited from holding any position of trust requires an oath of office. See bar member videos 1, 2, and 3. All bar members are foreign agents of the Roman cult and Baal priests. Remember, we talked about it already, the City of London and the bar. The Roman cult needed their bought and paid for bar members to infiltrate to accomplish the rest of the things named in here. And this is step 7, bar member infiltration. Article 6, Articles of Confederation. Nor shall any person holding any office of profit or trust under the United States or any of them accept any present emolument, office, or title of any kind whatsoever from any king, prince, or foreign state, nor shall the United States and Congress assembled or any of them grant any title of nobility. This is Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the U.S. Constitution, Constitution for the United States of America. No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States. No person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of Congress, accept any present emolument, office, title, or any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state. Thirteenth Amendment, Article 13, an amendment. If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without the consent of Congress, accept and retain any present pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States and shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under them or either of them. And that's 13th Amendment, the original 13th Amendment. Step 8, Civil War and Martial Law. Everything from this point requires the Roman cult's martial law. So this is Liber Code, Article 12. The law of war can no more wholly dispense with retaliation than can the law of nations, of which it is a branch. Yet civilized nations acknowledge retaliation as the sternest feature of war. So It's international law. Article 1, Lever Code. Place, district, or country occupied by an enemy stands in consequence of the occupation under the martial law of the invading or occupying army, whether any proclamation declaring martial law or any public warning to the inhabitants has been issued or not. Martial law is the immediate and direct effect and consequence of occupation or conquest. The presence of a hostile army proclaims its martial law. Article 2, martial law does not cease during the hostile occupation except by special proclamation ordered by the Commander-in-Chief or by special mention in the Treaty of Peace, in the Treaty of Peace concluding the war, when the occupation of a place or territory continues beyond the conclusion of peace as one of the conditions of the same. So, again, martial law doesn't cease unless there's a special proclamation or a special mention in the Treaty of Peace. Neither one of those has happened. Article 3. Martial law in a hostile country consists in the suspension by the occupying military authority of the criminal and civil law and of the domestic administration and government in the occupied place or territory, and in the substitution of military rule and force for the same, as well as in the dictation, as in dictatorship, of general laws as far as military necessity requires the suspension, substitution, and dictation. Note, under the law martial, only the criminal jurisdiction of a military court is the recognized law, but as Article 3 says, the civil courts can continue wholly or in part as long as the civil jurisdiction does not violate the military orders laid down by the Commander-in-Chief or one of his commanders. By this means, a military venue, jurisdiction, and authority are imposed upon the occupied populace under the disguise of the ordinary civil courts and officers of the occupied district or region, because of the so-called civil authorities in an occupied district or region only act at the pleasure of a military authority. It should also be noted here that the several state legislatures, county boards of commissioners, and city councils are constantly legislating to please the edicts of the federal government, the occupying force, and that their legislation in this sense is not an exercise of state sovereignty, but instead a compliance with the edicts of the military force which occupies the several states, and consequently are edicts of martial law rule. And that's taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge H. Ellett to the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. When the Southern states walked out of Congress in 1861, they ceased to have a quorum. Under executive authority, Lincoln ordered Congress to reconvene. When the Supreme Court ruled against something Lincoln did, he ordered troops to the Supreme Court. And now Rule 45 of the Supreme Court says all process of this court issues in the name of the President of the United States. So there's no separation of powers. Hasn't been since the Civil War. All of the federal statutes passed prior to 1861 are lawful de jure statutes. All federal statutes passed after 1861 are martial law statutes. Two national governments exist, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument. In 1871, Congress set up a corporation to operate as government of the District of Columbia. It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9, 1933, 48 Stat 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. HJR 192, 73rd Congress in session June 5, 1933, joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolve the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. And that's taken from Congressional Record, March 17, 1993. Since March 9, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the President may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways control the lives of all American citizens. A majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule for 40 years. Freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have in varying degrees been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. This is taken from U.S. Senate Report number 93-549, dated November 19, 1973. Search for it online. It's easy to find. Martial law extends to property and to persons, whether they are subjects of the enemy or aliens to that government. Subjects or aliens, nobody else. Does not affect the sovereignty. Why would anyone want to be a low-life scumbag U.S. citizen? All subjects over which the sovereign power of the state extends are objects of taxation, but those over which it does not extend are exempt from taxation. This proposition would be pronounced as self-evident. It's obvious. The sovereignty of the state extends to everything which exists by its authority or its permission. McCullough versus Maryland, U.S. Supreme Court, 1819. Same thing applies in Canada. Owned means subject to the regulations. So if you're subject, you're property. Canadian Ownership and Control Act. Let a state be considered as subordinate to the people, but let everything else be subordinate to the state. The term resident and citizen of the United States is distinguished from a citizen of one of the several states in that the former is a special class of citizen created by Congress. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the other property, the territory, and other property belonging to the United States. Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. It is evident that they, U.S. citizens, have not the political rights which are vested in citizens of the states. They are not constituents of any community in which is vested any sovereign power of government. Their position partakes more of the character of subjects than of citizens. They are subject to the laws of the United States, but they have no voice in its management. If they are allowed to make laws, the validity of these laws is derived from the sanction of a government in which they're not represented. Mere citizenship they may have, but the political rights of citizens they cannot enjoy. People versus De La Guerra, 1870, California Court. I'm not sure which one. Martial law affects chiefly the police and the collection of public revenue and taxes, whether imposed by the expelled government or by the invader. Refers mainly to the support and efficiency of the army, its safety, and the safety of its operations. That's Article 10 of the Libre Code. In doing this, I shall have occasion incidentally to evince how true it is that states and governments were made for man, at the same time how true it is that his creatures and servants have first deceived, next vilified, and at last oppressed their master and maker. A state like a merchant makes a contract, a dishonest state like a dishonest merchant willfully refuses to discharge it. And boy, is that ever going on today. Step 9, disappear the Article 13 and Amendment. The War of 1812, major engagement, burned the National Archives. The true Article 13 and Amendment found in the Constitution taken from 1819 Virginia statutes. True Article 13 Amendment found in the Constitution taken from 1850s Colorado statutes. The Crown and the Roman cult needed their bar member bail priest to infiltrate. The Roman cult hired the War of 1812. There's the 1819 Constitution, the 13th Amendment taken from the 1819 Constitution. And step 10, infiltrate Roman cult bar members and seize control. Create unconstitutional municipal corporations, put municipal corporations deep into debt, seize them in bankruptcy, seize the courts. It's the same procedure that precipitated the War of Independence. 70 to 90% of Congress and legislatures are bar members. All legislation is reviewed by bar members. Almost all judges are bar members. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow me on Steam It. Don't forget to like this video on YouTube. Don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload on Steam It. Don't forget to vote and make your comments. That's the front page of my channel. The subscribe button's already been clicked or it'll be red. The bell has not been clicked. The arrow's pointing at the bell. It would look like it's vibrating if it had been clicked. Step 11. Roman cult bar members convert citizenship into the opposite of what was intended. And while the 14th Amendment does not create a national citizenship, it has the effect of making that citizenship paramount and dominant instead of derivative and dependent upon state citizenship. That's U.S. Supreme Court, Colgate versus Harvey. So before the 14th Amendment, the state's U.S. citizenship was derivative and dependent upon being a state citizen. And afterwards, it was paramount and dominant. In other words, you could be a U.S. citizen without being a state citizen. And the amendment, 14th, reversed and annulled the original policy of the Constitution. See the so-called 14th Amendment in this unconstitutional video. The 14th Amendment creates or at least recognizes for the first time a citizenship of the United States as distinct from that of the states. Yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical immunity, for when they were driven out of all their former holes, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted, not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiefs to the use of the religious houses, thus distinguishing between the possession and the use and receiving the actual profits, while the season of the land remained in the nominal fief, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy, to be bound in conscience to account to his sesticate use of the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's taxes. This is all Roman cult, folks. Ecclesiastical ingenuity, that's the Roman cult, folks. Courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy, that's the Roman cult, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. Still the foundation of modern conveyancing. This is the D.C. Code, Act of D.C. Code, which was approved March 3rd, 1901. The word person shall be held to apply to partnerships and corporation and a legal estate to be the sesticate use. It's all about corporate entities. So they just convert you into a corporation and then assault you. Or presume you're a corporation. And that's what they do. Oh, look at that. Presumption of death. Presumption of death. Sesticate trust. 31 Stat 1230 in the D.C. Code. Presumption of death. Every taxpayer is a sesticate trust having sufficient interest in preventing abuse of the trust to be recognized in the field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. That's a summary from Henry Bollins. A citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the public charitable trust, the constructive sesticate trust of U.S. Inc. under the 14th Amendment, which upholds the debt of the USA and U.S. Inc. And that's a summary of 5 pages of congressional record. Step 12, Roman cult bar members circulate fake money under Roman law. At common law in the gold or silver legal tender, the forced loans of 1862 and 1863 in the form of legal tender notes were vital forces in the struggle for national supremacy. They form a part of the public debt of the United States. Article 33 of the Libra Code. United States acknowledge and protect in hostile countries occupied by them religion and morality, strictly private property, the persons of the inhabitants, especially those of women, and the sacredness of domestic relations. Offenses to the contrary shall be rigorously punished. This rule does not interfere with the right to the victorious invader to tax the people or their property, to levy forced loans, to billet soldiers, appropriate property, especially houses, lands, boats, or ships, and churches, for temporary and military uses. The passage of Congress and the first Legal Tender Act was placed distinctly upon the existing imperative need of government, and the Legal Tender Clause was urged and adopted as a war measure. U.S. Supreme Court, 1884. As used in this act, the term United States means government of the United States. The term currency of the United States means currency which is legal tender in the United States and includes United States notes, Federal Reserve notes, Gold Reserve Act of 1934, 48 Stat 337 creates the presumption that you're a government employee by using Federal Reserve notes. That's right. Step 13, Roman cult bar members create unconstitutional municipal corporations. The governments are but trustees acting under derived authority and have no power to delegate what is not delegated to them. But the people, as the original fountain, might take away what they have delegated and entrust to whom they please. The sovereignty in every state resides in the people of the state, and they may alter and change their form of government at their own pleasure. Two national governments exist, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument. In 1871, Congress set up a corporation to operate as the government of the District of Columbia. A delegate cannot delegate. An agent cannot delegate his functions to a subagent without the knowledge or consent of the principal. The person to whom the office or duty is delegated cannot lawfully devolve the duty on another unless he be expressly authorized to do so. A delegated power cannot be delegated. A deputy cannot have or appoint a deputy. That's right. The unconstitutional corporation is what it is. Martial law in a hostile country. This is Article 3 of the Libra Code. Consists in the suspension by the occupying military authority of the criminal and civil law of the domestic and the domestic administration and government in the occupied place or territory, and in substitution of military rule and force for the same, as well as in the dictation of general laws as far as military necessity requires the suspension and substitution or dictation, or dictatorship. This is the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment. Note, under the law of martial, only the criminal jurisdiction of a military court is the recognized law, but as Article 3 says, the civil courts can continue wholly or in part as long as the civil jurisdiction does not violate the military orders laid down by the Commander-in-Chief or one of his commanders. By this means, a military venue, jurisdiction, and authority are imposed upon the occupied populace under the disguise of the ordinary civil courts and officers of the occupied district or region, because the so-called civil authorities in an occupied district or region only act at the pleasure of a military authority. It also should be noted here that the several state legislatures, county boards of commissioners, and city councils are constantly legislating to please the edicts of the federal government, the occupying force, and that their legislation in this sense is not an exercise of state sovereignty, but instead a compliance with the edicts of the military force which occupies the several states, and consequently are edicts of martial law rule. And that's taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellen to the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. There has been created a fictional federal state of XXX within a state. See Howard versus Sinking Fund of Louisville. And oh, look at that. Indiana and Company. Engaged in providing peace, justice, security, opportunity, health, highways, education, conservation, recreation. Certificate. Every Indiana citizen is a stockholder in 4,300 school buildings, 9,168 miles of highways, 34 state parks and memorials, 19 state institutions, 4 college universities, state library, state fair, and is entitled to services rendered by all state departments such as police, courts, health, securities commission, public service commission, Social Security, conservation, industry, and labor services. Can't read the rest of it. Insured bank deposits and life insurance policies, etc. That's on the side. This certifies that every Indiana citizen is the owner of a full share of capital stock of Indiana and Company. And I can't read the rest of it. First day of January 1938, signed by the governor. Report for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 1936 and ending June 30th, 1937, prepared by the Indiana Gross Income Tax Division, Indiana Department of Treasury Board. Step 14, Roman cult bar members put municipal corporations into bankruptcy. It's an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9, 1933, 48 Stat 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. HJR 192, 73rd Congress in session June 5, 1933, joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolve the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental offices, officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. And that's the United States Congressional Record, March 17, 1993. Since March 9th, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency, which is the same day they went into bankruptcy. March 9th, 1933. Same day they went into bankruptcy. And Roosevelt was elected and was sworn in 3 or 4 days before that. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the President may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communications, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways control the lives of all American citizens. The majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule. For 40 years, freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have in varying degrees been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. U.S. Senate Report number 93-549, dated November 19, 1973. Congress, claiming its martial law power to declare war, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, imposed martial law in the United States and never discontinued it. The result was an extension of military and municipal jurisdiction of Congress. But where's the evidence of this? Look at the 13th Amendment, the Civil Rights Acts, the legal tender laws, the 14th Amendment, etc., etc., etc. And this is taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court. And he is talking about the Civil War. So they imposed martial law in the United States when southern states walked out of Congress, is what happened, and then never discontinued it. Revised Code of Washington, Legislative Declaration for Civil Liberties Day of Remembrance. Yeah, like a day of remembrance, like the day that we used to have them. The legislature recognizes that on February 19, 1942, the President of the United States issued Executive Order 9066, which authorized military rule over civil laws and lives. Causes and necessities for taking up arms, it's the same thing that went on with the War of Independence, and it continues to this day. Statutes have been passed extending the course of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and estimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial, and for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter. We saw the misery which such dictatorship would reduce us. Causes and necessities for taking up arms, 1775. Step 15, Roman cult seizes the corporation masquerading as the government. Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. Nothing can stand against the church. And that's Roman Catholic Archbishop James E. Quigley, in the Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. Oh, and look at that. Look at the Roman fasces next to the speaker's podium. This red text is kind of hard to read, but that's when the pimp went to speak to Congress, 24th of September, 2015. So we'll start with on the left right here, that's this text right here. We'll see what it says. It's pointing at this staff right here. This staff with the eagle on top. It says, Roman Achaea military staff carried in battle by all Roman commands, planted on all conquered nations. And now we'll go to this one, and it's pointing at Biden. He's sitting right there. Devout Roman Catholic, honorary degree of Jesuit, Scranton University. Then we'll look at this, and it's pointing at these right here, these. Roman bundle of rods bound to a weapon, symbolizing subservient under the rule of a single man. And then this, pointing at Boner, Beaner, whatever his name was Speaker of the House of Representatives at the time. Devout Roman Catholic, trained by Jesuits, installed first Jesuit chaplain to the House. Yeah, right. And there's all the bail priests in the Supreme Court with their military uniforms. We now live in a nation where doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, government destroys freedom, the press destroys information, religion destroys morals, and our banks destroy the economy. Yep. Pentagon Inc., Google, YouTube, Facebook, Amazon masquerading as private companies. NSA takes care of the spying, CIA takes care of the drug trade, FBI takes care of the terror attacks and false flags, Homeland Security takes care of the rest. The CIA owns everyone of significance in the major media. Why do you think the media lies so much? We'll know our disinformation plan is complete when everything the American public believes is false. Why do you think the media lies so much? Deception is the state of mind and the mind of the state. There's the real domestic terrorists right there. Murdered by police. Americans killed in 2015 by cannabis, 0, Ebola, 1, snake bites, 2, ISIS, 3, playing football, 12, cow attack, 20, bee sting, 100, police, 1,100. Big Pharma, 100,000. We talked it over, and after investigating it ourselves, we've decided we're not guilty. Small penis, lack confidence, bullied at school, then why not join the police? You'll get to use the phrase such as, I am the law, respect my authority, tell it to the judge. Knowledge of the law is not needed and actively discouraged. Training includes practical steps on how to manufacture consent to statutory rules, intimidation techniques, and legalese speak. Below average intelligence and absolute obedience to authority is mandatory. Beware violent street gangs. Typical gang member, well organized, gang identifier, gang callers, heavily armed. Do not approach gang members, are aggressive and notoriously violent. Step 16, Roman cult merges the bankrupt corporations. Congressional record, June 12, 1940. Oh, yeah, August 12th, 1940. Step toward British Union, a world state, international strife. Congressional record. Mr. Speaker, the information contained, actually it's further down. We'll go ahead to the next part. This highlighted stuff is down here. Mr. Speaker, the information contained in this booklet is important at this time, particularly in view of the fact that the pro-English groups in the United States are now working in close cooperation with world internationalist organizations Before 1917, foreign influence came mainly from the Anglo-American groups. Since the World War, these groups have been fortified by international financiers into internationalists, or the so-called minority group. The pressure is therefore more than double for combined. These groups control all avenues of communication, as in news media, and are now using them to further their plan of British domination to establish a world federation of states. Let me call your attention to the fact on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States, which appears in our dollar bills. You will find the exact symbol of the British Israel World Federation movement. This symbol is also carried on literature and other organizations promoting a world government and a world religion. At the bottom of the world circle surrounding the pyramid, you will find the wording Novus Ordo Seclorum. It was this new order that was advanced by Clinton Roosevelt several hundred years ago, recently in Philip Drew, and now followed by the executive. Any person who pays or delivers property to the holder of the certificate drawn up, hold it. Oh, that's the congressional record. Okay, so that's the end of it. Hague Conference on Private International Law, 2nd of October 1973. This is the convention concerning the international administration of estates of deceased persons. Any person who pays or delivers property to the holder of the certificate drawn up or where necessary recognized in accordance with the convention shall be discharged unless it is proved that the person acted in bad faith. That's Article 22 of the convention. So they're talking about birth certificates. Any person who has acquired assets of the estate from the holder of a certificate drawn up or where necessary recognized in accordance with this convention shall, unless it is proved that he acted in bad faith, be deemed to have acquired them from a person have power to dispose of them. Article 23. I have exclusive content available on my website and on Patreon. Website has 2 subscription levels and I accept cryptocurrencies. $29.99 a year for the videos only, $49.99 a year for the videos plus unlimited consultations. Except that I'm not a liar. Well, I'm in an attorney. No, I'm in a liar. But I can tell you what I would do and where to find the forms. The only power that the New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception, and my agenda is to expose it for all our benefit, but I cannot fight all the battles. Now, there's limitations on the consultations because that doesn't mean that I'm going to make voice communications, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to review documents. You're going to have to, if you want me to do more, than you can send me emails and we can, communicate that way. But like I said, I can tell you what I would do under the circumstances and where to find the forms. But any voice communications or document reviews is going to be, you need to make more donation. So my website is Arlington Private Information Share, Land Deed Training, Estoppel Certificates Training, Foreclosure Estoppel Certificates Training, Corporate Denial Training, Toll Roads Notice and Demand Training, Invoice Training, Notice of Void Judgment Training, Revocation of Signature Training, Third Party Witness Training, Federal Habeas Corpus Training, Revocation of Voter Registration Training, Criminal Complaint Training. There's actually, probably 3 or 4 videos on that and probably more. Lawsuit training, there's 1 on that and will be more. Other training requests, depending on if it's something I can do. Northeast Private Information Share videos are up there. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free in my 2 private groups at Yahoo Groups and Google Groups. All exclusive content will be on my website, and you can buy a subscription there. And I've got the Patreon. Step 17, convert all court cases into commercial transactions. Convert a court case into a commercial transaction. Convert an Article 3 judge into an Article 1 revenue officer, bail priest, clerk, masquerading as a judge who's working for the crown and the Roman cult. Pay for the errors and omissions insurance for the bail priest, thereby alleviating him from any responsibility in the matter. Makes it so that the bail priest, so-called judge, doesn't care what the outcome is. Nullifies the bail priest's oath of office in the matter, since all errors and omissions are covered by the insurance. converts the court case into a contract dispute in Admiralty, make it so that Bill Priest gets a collected royalty in the case in support of his multi-million-dollar retirement, gives the Bill Priest a special motivation to dismiss the case, thereby encourage more violations and create more business down the road, creates business for his Bill Priest buddies in the courts of appeals, creates the opportunity to leverage the fees by 30 times, since all courts are banks, to improve the balance sheets of their so-called court, and generates revenue for their Roman cult handlers. Step 18. Roman cult seizes control of all court cases and commercial transactions. All courts in Canada and the United States are United Nations courts under the Untitled Treaty and have been for over 30 years. All courts are de facto courts. There's no authority to delegate anything to the United Nations in the Constitution of the United States of America or the British North America Act. UNIDROIT stands for the Unification of Private Law, and the website says that 63 countries have adopted it, and it's designed to be automatically implemented. Canada and the United States have been signatories to the UNIDROIT Treaty for over 30 years. UNIDROIT website says nothing about Texas, Arizona, or any of the American states or Canadian provinces. Therefore, UNIDROIT's application in the American states and Canadian provinces only in federal areas. UNIDROIT covers negotiable instruments, civil procedures, secured transactions, legal status of women, maintenance obligations, contracts, banking law. All of that stuff is covered by the courts. There's the actual website showing well, we can get in bigger. Right there. Commercial contracts, cultural property, franchising, instruments, meetings. And then we'll get in closer to here too. Leasing, security interest, transports, banking law, capital markets, civil procedure, civil liability, contracts, cultural property, franchising, hotel keepers, insurance, intellectual property, leasing, legal status of women, maintenance obligations, movement of persons, negotiable instruments. It all falls under international law. Covers mandatory insurance for motor vehicles, anything related to marriage, divorce, and children. More UNIDROIT stuff, the Benelux Treaty. Well, let's get in closer. Benelux Treaty on compulsory insurance against civil liability in respect of motor vehicles. 1958. Convention concerning the recognition and enforcement of decisions relating to maintenance obligations towards children. 1959, European Convention on Compulsory Insurance Against Civil Liability in respect of motor vehicles. And this is all the countries. You know, when I did this, they had 63 states were members of the UNIDROIT. Australia, Canada, China, Chile, Brazil, Bolivia, Belgium. There's a bunch of them here. United States, United Kingdom. There's a bunch of them. There was 4 pages of them. Texas is not listed. Arizona is not listed. No American state. Alberta is not listed. British Columbia is not listed. Ontario is not listed. No Canadian province. Therefore, anything involving motor vehicles or the courts is both commercial and federal, and therefore by consent. All judges are actually clerks masquerading as a judge. Their black robe is their Bill Priest uniform. They routinely deny anything related to justice from happening because it's so good for business. Actually, it's because they're Masons and they're Satanists. They encourage their false flag operations and agent provocateurs because it's so good for business. They encourage police state murders, assaults, kidnappings, thefts because it's so good for business. Everything they do is a fraud and a lie because they're Satanists. All court cases are warfare. A mixed war is one which is made on one side by a public authority and the other by mere private persons. Warfare generates revenue for the Roman cult. Warfare promotes the Roman cult's agenda of population reduction. All warfare is a satanic religious ceremony. All bloodshed is a blood sacrifice to the Roman cult god Baal. And U.S. citizens are enemies of the state. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction of thereof are citizens of the United States. A citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the public charitable trust, the constructive Sesticate Trust of U.S. Inc. under the 14th Amendment, which upholds the debt of the USA and U.S. Inc. And that's a summary of 5 pages of the Congressional Record, June 13, 1967. Every taxpayer is assessed to a trust, having sufficient interest in preventing abuse of the trust to be recognized in the field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. Summary of Henry Bolins. Slater's protestations that he derives no benefit from the United States government have no bearing on his legal obligation to pay income tax unless the defendant can establish that he's not a citizen of the United States. The IRS possesses authority to determine his federal tax liability. That's where I'd file a bar grievance, find out who the bar member is. This is an act to establish a code of law for the District of Columbia, 1901, 31 Stat 1432, the legal estate to be the cestui use. This is more from the DC Code, 31 Stat 1189. That in the interpretation and construction of said code, the following rules shall be observed, namely, the word person shall held to be applied to partnerships and corporations. More DC Code, March 3rd, 1901, talking about the Supreme Court of the District of Columbia. That in addition to jurisdiction conferred at the preceding section, plenary jurisdiction is hereby given the said court holding the said special term to hear and determine all questions. Plenary, that's military dictatorship. Yawn. Absence of 7 years, they presume you're dead. So their legal estate to be held in the cestui trust, and they presume you're dead. If the Roman cult created the cestui trust, if the United States citizen is a cestui trust, if the Roman cult owns a U.S. citizen, if the legal estate in the United States is the cestui trust, then the Roman cult owns a U.S. citizen. If the legal estate in the United States is the cestui trust, then the Roman cult owns the United States. The Roman cult runs the so-called courts and wants to account to the rents and emoluments of their fraudulently created cestui trust. Citation, summons to appear, applied particularly to process in spiritual court. The ecclesiastical courts proceed according to the course of the civil and canon laws. Person not normally to be cited to appear out of the diocese. Every archbishop may cite any person. Any person are cited out of their diocese. If they are cited and do not appear, they are to be excommunicated. Good. Go ahead, excommunicate me. Make my day. Summons to appear applied particularly to process in spiritual court. The ecclesiastical courts proceed according to the course of civil and canon laws. This is more about citations. A tax is an impost imposed on the subject. An excise, a tallage. In public law, taxation signifies the system for raising money for public purpose by compelling payment by individuals of sums of money called taxes. Some general principles of taxation is said to be the subjects of every state ought to contribute to the support of the government as nearly as possible in proportion to their respective abilities, that is, in proportion to the revenue that they respectively enjoy under the protection of the state. In the observation of this, neglect of this maxim consists what is called equality or an inequality of taxation. That's the Dictionary of English Law, Sweet Maxwell Limited, London. Revenue. Okay, so that's corporate. Corporations have revenue. People have compensation. Compensation for labor. corporations have revenue. Declaration of Independencies combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, give his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of trial by jury. So it's all martial law and color of law. Act to impose taxes in commerce only, George III, Chapter 12, 1778. Whereas taxation by the Parliament for the purpose of raising a revenue has been found by experience to occasion great uneasiness and disorders. Well, no shit, Batman. That from and after the passing of this act, the King and Parliament of Great Britain will not impose any duty, tax, assessment, whatever, payable in any of His Majesty's colonies, plantations, provinces, or plantations in North America, except such duties as may be expedient for to impose for the regulation of commerce. That was 2 years after the Declaration of Independence. That's like closing the barn door after the horses get out. All statutes are for government property. In other words, Dominion legislation, even though it deals with Dominion property, okay? So there we go. That's government property. Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting territory or other property of the United States. Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. If you read any antebellum cases involving slavery, the debate was always over property rights. Antebellum was before the war, before the Civil War. Taxing power being in its nature unlimited over the subjects over which its control would enable the state governments to destroy the above-mentioned rights. If they can penny, they can take. If they can take a penny, they can take it all. All subjects over which the sovereign power of the state extends are objects of taxation, but those over which it does not extend are exempt. This proposition may also be pronounced as self-evident. It's obvious. For the very idea that one may be compelled to hold his life or the means of living or any material right essential to the enjoyment of life at the mere will of another seems to be intolerable in any free country where freedom prevails as being the essence of slavery itself. The privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States do not necessarily include all the rights protected by the first 8 amendments of the federal Constitution against the powers of the federal government. The only absolute and unqualified right of a United States citizen is to residence within the territorial boundaries of the United States. Civil rights under the 14th Amendment are for federal citizens, not state citizens. Federal citizens as parents have no right to the custody of their infant children except subject to the paramount right of the state. If you certify a birth certificate, you're going into international law. Causes and necessities for taking up arms said that martial law supersedes and replaces common law. So if you go into international law, martial law is international law. So if you go into international law, then you are basically giving up your common law rights. My contact information is in this video. Slavery is a status under Roman law. Capitis diminutio maxima, the diminution of a person's legal status as a result of being reduced to slavery. Status is a condition. Compare a state. A corporation has no status as a citizen outside the jurisdiction where it was created. Corporation's a citizen. A citizen's a corporation. They're assaulting you with a Sestake trust, and you are in the corporation. An act to enact the Uniform Commercial Code for the District of Columbia and other purposes. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. Status. A person's legal condition insofar as it imposed by the law without the person's consent, as opposed to a condition that a person has acquired by agreement. The law of status. It is one of three departments in which the civil law is divided. Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. Law of persons, the law relating to persons, the law which pertains to different statuses of persons. Okay, this is all fiction. It's all corporate law. With the Roman cult, civil law, status is everything. Remember, civil is civil. Roman civil law, and Roman law are convertible phrases meaning the same thing, same system of jurisprudence, being municipal law. And there's a maxim of Roman law that says, let he who is willing to be deceived be deceived. With the Roman cult, civil law, status is everything. There's no real justice. Justice is for sale, depending on who you are. Deals with statutes and corporations. With common law, status is nothing. It doesn't matter who you are. Everybody's treated the same. I think I'll add this in here. Okay, so, like I was saying, civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established for itself. More properly called municipal law, to distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. And let he who will be deceived be deceived. They lie, cheat, steal as much as they can, as much as you let them get away with. They're Satanists. And they're all Masons. And They're all Satanists. It's all Luciferianism. Albert Pike, Moral and Dogma. He is a Grand Master of the Freemasons. And he is a Luciferian, the Satanists. The Masons are all Satanists, and these judges are all Masons. Not all of them, but most of them. They certainly behave like it too. The term citizen in the United States is analogous to the term subject in the common law. U.S. citizen can murder their unborn children. Citizenship is a political status and may be defined and privilege limited by Congress. Term resident and citizen in the United States is distinguished from a citizen in one of the several states, as that the former is a special class of citizen created by Congress. Therefore, U.S. citizens residing in one of the states of the Union is classified as property and franchised to the federal government as an individual entity. A U.S. citizen, upon leaving the District of Columbia, becomes involved in interstate commerce as a resident, does not have the common law right to travel as a citizen in one of the several states. Residents, as distinguished from citizens, are aliens who are permitted to take up a permanent abode in the country. Being bound to the society by reason of their dwelling in it, they are subject to its laws so long as they remain there, and being protected by it, they must defend it. Although they do not enjoy all the rights of citizens, they have only certain privileges which law or custom gives them. Permanent residents are those who have been given the right to perpetual residence, but they're a sort of citizen of the less privileged character and are subject to the society without enjoying all its advantages. Their children succeed to their status, but the right of perpetual residence given them by the state passes to their children. The Law of Nations is taken from the Law of Nations by Vattel, Book 1, Chapter 19, Section 213, page 87. One does not necessarily become a non-resident by absconding or absenting himself from his place of abode. Residence, the fact of being officially present, statutory presence of an incumbent in a benefice. It might be correctly said there is no such thing as a citizen in the United States. A citizen in any one of the states of the Union is held to being called a citizen in the United States, although technically and abstractly there is no such thing. At the Revolution, the sovereignty devolved on the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of the country, but they are sovereigns without subjects, unless the African slaves among us may be so called, and have none to govern but themselves. The citizens of America is equal as fellow citizens, as joint tenants in the sovereignty. The right to trial by jury in civil cases guaranteed by the 7th Amendment, and the right to bear arms guaranteed by the 2nd Amendment have been distinctly held not to be privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States guaranteed by the 14th Amendment against infringement by the states. And in effect, the same decision was made in respect to guarantee against prosecution except by indictment of a grand jury contained in the 5th Amendment, and in respect of a right to be confronted with witnesses contained in the 6th Amendment. The technical niceties of the common law are not regarded. A jury does not ordinarily figure in the trial of an admiralty suit. The verdict of the jury, merely advisory, may be disregarded by the court. The rules of practice may be altered whenever found inconvenient or likely to embarrass the business of the court. The Court of Admiralty acts upon equitable principles. They can do whatever they feel like doing. A libel of information does not require all the technical precision of an indictment at common law. If the allegations describe the offense, it is all that is necessary. If it is founded upon a statute, it is sufficient if it pursues the words of the law. The Emily versus the Caroline. Yeah, we want to railroad this guy, so let's just throw the rules out. We therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of the states are not included in a catalog of controversies over which the Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power, nationally covers those citizens, even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. And that's National Mutual Insurance Company versus Tidewater Transfer Company. International law rule, adopted for areas under federal legislative jurisdiction, federalizes state civil law, including common law. The rule serves to federalize not only the statutory but the common law of a state. State and federal venue discussed. The civil laws effective in an area of exclusive federal jurisdiction are federal law, notwithstanding their derivation from state laws, and the cause arising under such laws may be brought in or removed to federal district court under sections 1331 and 1441 of the United States Code, giving jurisdiction to such courts in civil actions arising under the laws of the United States. This is taken from a book that easily is found online by just doing a simple search. Jurisdiction over federal areas within the states, report to the Interdepartmental Committee for the Study of Jurisdiction over Federal Areas within the States, Part 2, a text of the law of legislative jurisdiction submitted to the Attorney General and transmitted to the President June 1957, and is taken from pages 158 to 165. The true agenda, step 19, Roman cult bail priest denied justice. The true agenda of the Roman cult is lots of revenue, theft, and bloodshed. They can't have anyone being free, so they simply send out their Satanist order followers to assault people, kidnap people, falsely imprison people, and murder people. If anybody's not involved in one of the so-called contracts they assault them with, it anyway, and deny them a remedy. That's normal course of business. And there's a good example right there. There's the judge works with the state, the prosecutor works with the state, the police or witness works with the state, the pig. The vast majority of the disputes that the police initiate, the pigs initiate on behalf of their employer, are also adjudicated by their employer, where the plaintiff, the judge, the antagonist, the pigs, and the only witness, also the pigs, all represent the same party, and since no corpus delicti, mens rea, or actus reus can be produced, doesn't technically qualify to be heard according to its own laws. The state, therefore, is indistinguishable from a criminal cartel. And there's some more military uniforms by the bail priests on the Supreme Court. Anyone who's wearing a military uniform is an agent of the Roman cult. The wearing a clerical dress or religious habit on the part of lay folk is liable to the same penalty on the part of the state as the misuse of military uniform. And that's Article 10 of the Concordat of 1933 that Hitler signed with the Vatican. Almost all so-called governments are bankrupt and owned and operated by the Roman cult. At common law, a sheriff would have a star only, and a judge would wear a business suit. At common law, there is no uniform. Give me liberty or give me death. And that was Patrick Henry after he witnessed a man flogged to death for refusing to take a license. This is coming to a city near you. The tyrant, in order to hold his power, suppress every superiority, does away with good men, forbids education and light, controls every movement of the citizens, keeping them under perpetual servitude, wants them to grow accustomed to baseness and cowardice, as his spies everywhere to listen to what is said in the meetings, spreads dissension and calumny among the citizens and impoverishes them, is obliged to make war in order to keep his subjects occupied and impose upon them a permanent need of a chief. Well, that's Aristotle. And what do you think? Do you think Obama was a textbook tyrant? Okay. Got rid of the good people. He was firing all sorts of generals in the military, the ones that didn't want to go along with his program. Forbids education and light. They got on. There's the education system's all screwed up. Controls every movement of the citizens. That's the so-called war on terror. Keep them under perpetual servitude. That's the slavery with the taxes and everything. Wants them to grow accustomed to baseness and cowardice. That's right. They are cowards. The first thing they want to do is make sure you're disarmed. Won't sit there and face you like a man. Has his spies everywhere. What do you think the NSA and Facebook and Twitter, and they're listening in on everything. YouTube, they're censoring information. Spies everywhere is right. Listen to what is said in meetings. Spreads dissension and calumny. Spreads lies. among the citizens. That's the purpose of the bought and paid for news media, and is obliged to make war. Certainly under Obama, he got that Nobel Peace Prize because they knew that he was going to be going and making a bunch of wars, and so that's why they gave it to him early on, because they knew they wouldn't be able to give it to him later. All empires are built the same way. You get 50% of the poor to go to war with and kill the other 50% of the poor, leaving the right to chit-chat in the Senate, which gives the impression that there's real democracy. You absorb the land and riches of your enemies and repeat whenever you need cash for new resources. An administrator. Person authorized to manage and distribute the estate of an intestate or a testator who has no executor. In English law, administrators are the officers of the ordinary appointed by him and pursuant to the statute, and their title and authority are derived exclusively from the ecclesiastical judge. That's the pimp, by the way. Well, the pope. No, the pimp. At first, the ordinary was appointed administrator under the Statute of Westminster, required the ordinary to appoint the next of kin and the relations by blood of the deceased. Next, he could appoint the widow or the next of kin or both at his discretion. And Trump is an officer of the court of the ordinary. The court of the ordinary, American law, a court which has jurisdiction on probate wills and regulation of the management of decedents. Such court exists in Georgia, New Jersey, South Carolina, and Texas. Court of the ordinary. Ordinary, civil law term for any judge who hath authority to take cognizance of causes in his own right, not by deputation. By the common law, it's taken for him who hath ordinary or exempt and immediate jurisdiction in causes ecclesiastical. The name is applied to a bishop who hath original jurisdiction. An archbishop is the ordinary of the whole province to visit and receive appeals from inferior jurisdictions. See, this Roman cult makes all sorts of bureaucracy for each other, right? Citation. All about ecclesiastical. Courts ecclesiastical. My contact information is my blog is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo.com. My YouTube profile is Sovereign Living. My Facebook community page I deleted it due to censorship on the part of Facebook. My private group at Facebook is being deleted. My Yahoo private group, actually, I don't have. It's freelist.org. Yahoo shut down all our groups. And Twitter shut down my profile. My Steemit profile, Sovereignty International, BitChute, and Patreon. There are 2 ways to conquer and enslave a nation. I think I already went over that. He, the prisoner, as a consequence of his crime, not only forfeit his liberty, but his personal rights, except those which the law in its humanity affords him. He is for the time being a slave of the state. A penitentiary has meant a penitent, an ordainer of penances, a place of penitence. So that's what a penitentiary is, okay? This is all tied to the Roman cult, folks. All these prisons are being sold into slavery. These people are Satanists. In doing this, I shall have occasion incidentally to evince how true it is that states and governments were made for man, and at the same time how true it is that His creatures and servants at first deceived, next vilified, and at last oppressed their master and maker. Let a state be considered as subordinate to the people, and everything else is subordinate to the state. And because it brings into action and enforces this great and glorious principle that the people are the sovereign of this country, and consequently that fellow citizens and joint sovereigns cannot be degraded by appearing with each other in their own courts to have their controversies determined. And I already read this. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and what never will be. If tyranny and oppression come to this land, it will be in the guise of fighting a foreign enemy. The business of journalists is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. You know it, and I know it. And what folly is the toasting and independent press. We are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, our lives are all property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes. John Swinton, former Chief of Staff, New York Times. Order followers, the servants of evil. You assist an evil system effectively by obeying its orders and decrees. An evil system never deserves such allegiance. Allegiance to it means partaking of the evil. A good person will resist an evil system with his or her whole soul. Order followers are the one who keep the system of slavery in place. Well said, Mark Passio. Never forget the men who started this country were marijuana-growing, whiskey-drinking, tax-evading rebels who left their beds at night to shoot at the pigs. War is when your government tells you who the enemy is. Revolution's when you figure it out for yourself. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change we seek. The rights of sovereignty extend to all persons and things not privileged that are within the territory. They extend to all strangers resident therein, not only to those who are naturalized and to those who are domiciled therein, having taken up their abode with the intention of permanent residence, but also to those whose residence is transitory. All strangers are under the protection of the sovereign while they are within his territory and owe a temporary allegiance in return for that protection. U.S. Supreme Court, 1873. So these plates are available, laminated sheet text codes. These are all plates that are available. I like the Texas plates because it can be used anywhere because all states, Canada, Mexico included, are required to recognize Texas law. A political subdivision of the state may not require an owner of a motor vehicle to register the vehicle. You can get one plate and one probable cause lamination for $2 or $3, eh? For $3. Pieces of silver, 1 troy ounce each, or $50 in military script. Before you do this, you need to be prepared to defend it. That's why I have the card in my car, because the discussion should end right there. My PayPal is Engineer Win at Hotmail. You can get the Forbidden Zone laminated sheets from Catman1. Probable cause. There's my probable cause sheets. There's the other side, false arrest, penal code. This is Texas laws. And Texas crimes. So it's all coming from the Roman cult. That's the bottom line. It's all coming from the Roman cult. Lucifer worship. The Easter vigil in 2012 is St. Peter's Basilica. There's a YouTube video. That's a YouTube video. Catholic Church exposed Satan in the Vatican. And here is the text. It says, it's in Latin. This guy is singing it in Latin. I say, O Lucifer, who will never be defeated, Christ is your son. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. Of course, he doesn't want you to be able to defend yourself. My history of the Jesuits is not eloquently written, but it is supported by unquestionable authorities. This is very particular and very horrible. There, the Jesuit order's restoration in 1814 by Pope Pius VII is indeed a step towards darkness, cruelty, despotism, and death. I do not like the appearance of the Jesuits, as ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell. It is the Society of Loyola. Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. Nothing can stand against the Church. And that's Roman Catholic Archbishop James E. Quigley, Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. Two national governments exist, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument. That's Downs versus Bidwell in 1901. Why do you think Donald Trump's first international trip includes the Roman cult on the itinerary? Why do you think Pope looks so angry in his pictures with Donald Trump? There, him and Obama are laughing and chuckling. Yeah, but in the one with Trump, he knows that things are not going to go well for him. So I guess we'll see. Adolfo Nicholas Pachon, 2008, 30th Superior General of the Society of Jesus, the Black Pope, January 2008, to the present Master and Overseer of the White Pope, who at the time was Benedict XVI, Satan's present ruler of the world. Go ye then all to the world and take possession of all lands in the name of the Pope. He who will not accept him as vicar of Jesus and vice-regent on earth, let him be accursed and exterminated. The Jesuit extreme oath on induction, and look at the image, the statue there is, they got their foot on somebody. The Jesuit oath, only part of it. I further promise and declare that I will, when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war secretly, openly against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their inexorable race. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, and the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, and dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed so to do by any agent of the Pope or Superior of the blood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. Right, so they're Satanists. They murder, they lie, they cheat, they steal. Ever wonder why the earth is so diabolically evil? Meet the man that plans it that way. The Black Pope, Adolfo Nicholas, the most powerful man in the world behind the plan for the New World Order. The Superior General of the Jesuits, the Black Pope, Adolfo Nicholas, and his 6 generals control the White Pope and the Vatican and the entire list below. The Illuminati, the Zionists, the Global Elitists, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, the Freemasons, the Council of 300, the United Nations, and the Council of Trent. The Jesuits control the Knights Templar, the Knights of Columbus, the Knights of Malta, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the ASIO, the MI5, MI6, NCIS, FSB, DGSE, Mossad, and every intelligence agency in the world are Masonic and controlled by the Jesuits. The Jesuits have infiltrated most governments and leaders, including Obama, making them puppets that carry out Jesuit orders, including Biden. Vatican New World Order. Herman Van Rompuy, president of the European Council, stated recently, "We're all Jesuits." He was referring to those prominent European leaders with whom he was developing Roman Catholic architecture for the future Europe. It creates unbreakable ties, so there is a Jesuit international. Pope Francis commits idolatry at the feet of a Mary statue. He's sitting there, he's committing idolatry. He's kissing the feet of that statue. Wherever this seal is openly displayed, the Jesuit order is in control, and that seal is actually not there. The IHS. I don't know. I probably ought to delete that. And this is Dum Diversus that we talked about already. The Rothschilds have been part of the Jesuit order since way before 1776. The Maltese Cross indicates membership and allegiance to the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, a Masonic order created in 1099 by direct descendants of Roman emperors, of which the Jesuit order is a brand. Isn't it interesting that the Pope calls fake news a sin, yet the Catholic Church has been selling false saviors and implicated in child pedophilia for centuries? And this is the Vatican's Holocaust by Avro Manhattan, Knight of Malta, which is kind of interesting. Sensational account of the most horrifying religious massacre of the 20th century by Avro Manhattan, Knight of Malta. He died in 1990. Avro Manhattan was the world's foremost authority in Roman Catholicism and politics. A resident of London during World War II, he operated a radio station called Radio Freedom, broadcasting to occupied Europe. He was the author of over 30 books, including the bestseller of the Vatican and World Politics, twice Book of the Month Club, going through 57 editions. He was a Great Briton who risked his life daily to expose some of the darkest secrets of the papacy. His books were number one on the Forbidden Index for the past 50 years, and the editor's note in 2006, it was 70 years. Vatican's Holocaust is not a misnomer, an accusation, and even less a speculation. It's a historical fact. If you claim those Sestakray trust accounts, they're all a fraud. And so if you claim them, then you go into international law, you give up common law, you become then you get to deal with a bunch of thieves. So go ahead, knock yourself out. I think you're making a big mistake. Rabid nationalism and religious dogmatism were the two main ingredients. During the existence of Croatia as an independent Catholic state, over 700,000 men, women, and children perished. Many were executed, tortured, died of starvation, buried alive, or were burned to death. Hundreds were forced to become Catholic. Catholic padres ran concentration camps. Catholic priests were officers of the military corps, which committed such atrocities. 700,000 in a total population of a few million. Proportionately would be as if 1/3 of the USA population had been exterminated by a Catholic militia. What has been gathered in this book will vindicate the veracity of these facts. Dates, names, places, as well as photos are there to prove them. They should become known to the American public, not to foster vindictiveness, but to warn them of the danger which racialism and sectarianism, when allied with religious intolerance, can bring to any contemporary nation, whether in Europe or the New World. This work should be assessed without prejudice as a lesson, but even more vital as a warning for the future of Americans, beginning with that of the USA. An armed Serbia could have easily, editor's note, an armed Serbia could have easily prevented this Holocaust. Thank God for the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees the right to bear arms. Freedom of religion and an armed citizenry go hand in hand as the only guarantees that this won't happen in the U.S. Editor's note, it's the Vatican's one world government that doesn't want you to have the right to own arms or to use any means to defend yourself. And well said. The New World Order. Read the middle paragraph. It was written in 1989. New World Order will include the changes in the family. Homosexual marriages will be legalized. Parents will not be allowed to raise their children. The state will, all women will be employed by the state and not allowed to be homemakers. Divorce will become exceedingly easy, and monogamous marriage will be slowly phased out. The workplace, the government will become the owner of all the factories of production. The private ownership of property will be outlawed. Religion will be outlawed, and believers will be either eliminated or imprisoned. There will be a new religion, the worship of man and his mind. All will believe in the new religion. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Some of it's already going on. Jewish Encyclopedia, Rothschilds are the guardians of the papal treasure. Meanwhile, the nationalist reactionary parties in France desired to counterbalance the Semitic influence of the Rothschilds in establishing a banking concern which would essentially be Catholic. And then if you go down, it's somewhat curious sequel to the attempt to set up a Catholic competitor to the Rothschilds at the present time, that the latter are the guardians of the papal treasure. Check out my other videos, Bankster Thieves playlist, Roman cult playlist, bankrupt corporate so-called governments, bar members 1 through 3, do-it-yourself, how not to volunteer for the selective service and the draft, martial laws here, do-it-yourself, no income tax, do-it-yourself, free mail, do-it-yourself, kangaroo courts 1 through 19, Canada Border Pigs playlist, bar members and their Satanic Connections playlists. When your government has all the guns, that's what happens right there. Any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. Just following orders. I was just following orders is never a valid excuse or justification for immoral criminal behavior, and this lame attempt to abdicate personal responsibility should never be accepted as a valid excuse. Every great injustice is at the hands of someone just following orders. Law-abiding citizens. Look at all the law-abiding citizens there, and look at the brave soldiers just doing their job. Yeah, look at all the law-abiding citizens. Those who make their fortunes from you being sick are the same people who tell you what will make you well. Death by medicine. Matter of fact, it's called medicide. Every great injustice has been at the hands of someone just following orders. Oh, there's some more good law-abiding citizens. Taxes were not raised to carry on wars. Wars were raised to carry on taxes. Ain't that the truth? Oh, and there's some just following orders and some law-abiding citizens. The war is not meant to be won. It's meant to be continuous. There's some law-abiding citizens again. We had grasped the great truth that it was not rifles, not tanks, not atom bombs that created power, nor upon them that power rested. Power rested upon public obedience to a willingness to submit. And look at, there's a whole bunch more law-abiding citizens there. Why does the government want to ban semi-automatic rifles? Because they know you won't willingly get into boxcars. That's exactly why. Time to wake up, folks. China established gun control in 1935. From 1948 to 1952, 20 million political dissidents unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. So come on, China, come on over. We'll fix you up. The illusion of free choice, the left-right paradigm. This is the torture chambers that the Roman cult participated in. Okay, these are all their little tools that they used when they murdered all those 50 million people. There was Rack, there was the Iron Maiden, the Scavenger's Daughter. These are all torture chambers the Roman cult participated in. Fidget Spinner, 1586. In the United States, is third in murders throughout the world. If you remove Chicago, Detroit, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, and New Orleans, the United States is then 189th out of 193 countries in the entire world. P.S. All 5 cities have strict gun control laws and are run by Democrats. Probably the elections are rigged, too. When war is your enemy, war is when your government tells you who the enemy is. Revolution's when you figure it out for yourself. Liberty and freedom are at stake. Your silence isn't golden, it's yellow. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another, to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. That doesn't mean go away, that means blow their brains out. It is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Give me liberty or give me death. Patrick Henry, after he witnessed a man flogged to death for refusing to take a license, this is coming to a city near you. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren, the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him or selleth him, then that thief shall die. Thou shalt put evil away from among you, and through covetousness shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingereth not, and damnation slumbereth not. You are the father of the devil, the lusts of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he's a liar and the father of it. But the fearful and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers, that's the pharmaceutical drug dealers, and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. By which he also went and preached to the spirits in prison. It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high, and the kings of the earth upon the earth, and they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit. and shall be shut up in the prison, and after many days shall they be visited. Behooves every man who values liberty of conscience for himself to resist invasions of it in the case of others, or the case may, by chance change of circumstances, become his own. If ye love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsel or arms. Crouch down, lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may our posterity forget that you are ever our countrymen. Well said, Samuel Adams. When it shall be said in any country of the world, my poor are happy, neither ignorance or distress is to be found among them. My jails are empty of prisoners, my streets of beggars. The aged are not in want, the taxes are not oppressive. The rational world is my friend, because I am friend of its happiness. When these things can be said, then may that country boast of its constitution and government, and we have nothing to boast about here. There are two possible outcomes I prefer. The first, prudence require we prepare for the second outcome. The events that precipitated the final collapse of the Soviet Empire is educate the order followers. Outcome two is a war of independence. Least desirable scenario, very ugly scenario. We may not survive. Many will not survive. Oh, say, can you see? But if the watchmen see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned that the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity. But his blood will I require at the watchman's hands. Either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. You are now a watchman. Circulate this video far and wide. At some point, we will all be forced to do something. Okay, well, I guess that's about it for today. I appreciate you guys watching. It's gone on for quite a while now. We're about done with this presentation. Thanks for watching. And next week, we're going to have the advanced training. We're going to be talking about bar complaints. We're going to be talking about nasty grams that I send to judges and those kinds of people, and we'll be talking about some other things that we do that are different. And so if you can come, that's great. Be looking forward to it. That'll be starting Friday morning at 10 a.m. on Friday Eastern time. And meanwhile, we're in Ocean City, New Jersey. Life's a beach.